All right, let's dive right into today's explainer. We're going to trace the corporate ladder of a global underworld syndicate, all the way from the gritty literal ground floor to the terrifying top. We're breaking down the hidden, incredibly structured hierarchy of the Israeli Mafia, looking closely at how an individual actually rises through these ranks. We'll be paying special attention to this crazy shifting balance of financial risk versus reward and how your required tactical and strategic skills completely transform as you climb higher up the chain. It's a fascinating, dark ascent, so let's get right into it. So picture this. You've just stepped out of your mandatory military service. You're flat broke. And suddenly, a guy you recognize from the local gym pulls up in a brand new BMW and asks you exactly this question. Are you tired of being a friar? You know, a sucker. This guy, he never seems to have a boss, he's always flush with cash, and he's basically offering you a way out. So, you get in the car, and boom, that is the exact moment your life in the syndicate begins. You know, you're 19, standing on some humid street corner in Tel Aviv. While your friends might be planning backpacking trips to India or somewhere fun, you're staring at your bank account and seeing absolutely nothing but zeros. You're looking for a way to actually monetize all that intense military discipline you just acquired, which makes you the perfect, prime target for the machine to recruit. You've got the tactical training, sure, but you desperately need the capital.
Okay, let's start at the bottom. Level 1, entry-level enforcement, usually called the soldier.
Welcome to the literal ground floor. At this stage, your job is entirely tactical and heavily focused on stuff like suburban debt collection. So, here's where your first major financial risk versus reward dynamic kicks in. As a soldier, you're handed a list of small business owners who are late on their protection fees. Now, you're not using a gun, you're just using your military-honed physique and a totally dead-eyed stare. You threaten a restaurant owner, let's say, telling him he has exactly 24 hours to cough up 50,000 shekels. Your cut, about 4,000 shekels a week. Which, hey, it's better than working a normal entry-level job. But look at the risk here. You carry absolutely all of it. If the cops grab you, the organization instantly erases you from their memory. You either stay completely silent or you just disappear. Moving up, Level 2, Logistics and Transport. The transporter. Say you make it to age 22, and because you've actually proven you can keep your mouth shut and handle the heat, you get a corporate promotion. You're now in the syndicate's high-stakes logistics division. Your new tactical requirements are highly specific. You are not moving bulky, cheap street goods anymore. Oh no, you're moving low-volume, massively high-value cargo. We're talking diamonds straight from the exchange in Ramat Gan, or maybe high-purity MDMA out of the Netherlands. Your job is to perfectly play the role of a young tech entrepreneur. You board business class, your heart is absolutely hammering out of your chest as you step up to clear customs in Antwerp or Amsterdam, and you make sure that suitcase never, ever leaves your sight. For taking on this highly specialized logistical work, you're pulling in $5,000 per trip now. It's a really solid bump in your financial reward. You start buying your first luxury watches, you're feeling completely untouchable, but let's be real, you're actually still just a specialized mule. You are taking on massive international border risks for the organization. But stick with it, because by age 27, that financial reward just skyrockets to $30,000 a month. You are completely leaving the street corners and the airports behind, and you are entering the modern, digital heart of the syndicate.
Which brings us to Level 3, the tech strategist.
You're officially off the streets and sitting in a high-end, air-conditioned office building in Herzliya. You're wearing designer suits, casually telling your parents you work in fintech, and honestly, looking at you, they totally believe it. But look at this clear evolution we're seeing here. You've gone from brute, tactical enforcement to managing incredibly complex strategic requirements. Notice the shift in the skill set. As a tech strategist, you're managing full-blown boiler rooms. You're overseeing teams of like 20 salespeople who are actively running international investment scams, or you're coordinating offshore unregulated gambling sites. And your strategic risk? Well, that's leveled up too. You aren't dodging local beat cops anymore. Now you are actively trying to outsmart coordinated efforts between the FBI and the Mossad.
Let's step it up again. Level 4, the regional territory boss, often known as the plaza boss.
By 33, you've climbed the ladder again. Now you're overseeing an entire district of clubs and gambling dens. You're managing the exact same 19-year-old soldiers that you used to be. And man, the financial risk versus reward ratio just shifts dramatically at this level. Your financial reward absolutely explodes to a massive 6 figures, $100,000 a month. Plus, you hold total territorial control. You decide who sells and who gets taxed. But the strategic risk, it's intense.
If a rival syndicate from the north tries to open up a competing club in your turf, you don't call the authorities, right? As a pure business necessity to hold your ground, you send 2 hitmen on a motorcycle. So now you're literally managing violent gang warfare while simultaneously trying to negotiate with the local police to ensure their, let's call it, cooperation.
Moving into the stratosphere, levels 5 and 6, global operations and kingpins.
So, by the time you hit 40, the heat back in Israel is just way too intense to survive locally. So what do? You relocate to a villa in Cyprus or a massive penthouse in Marbella, Spain, to operate on a truly global scale. Your daily tasks shift to peak executive management. Just look at these strategic requirements. You don't even touch the product or the money directly anymore. Instead, you're coordinating vast synthetic drug networks. You're laundering millions through international real estate. You're sitting at tables negotiating face-to-face with Italian andrangheta bosses and South American cartel reps. You manage this dizzying labyrinth of shell companies, and instead of threatening local restaurant owners, you are now shaking hands with corrupt politicians and generals.
You've amassed tens of millions of dollars, right? You should be thrilled. Yet this quote perfectly captures your new reality. You live in a golden cage. You're the shadow figure behind the empire, but you're also the most hunted man in the Mediterranean. Paranoia completely dominates your life. You're constantly moving safe houses every 3 days. You're constantly wondering if your head of security is talking to the feds, or if your accountant is skimming off the top. People at this level often end up executing their closest allies just to feel safe for another week. You have endless money, but you haven't walked down a public street without a heavy security detail in years. And if you ever step off a plane at Ben Gurion Airport, it means immediate handcuffs.
And finally, level 7, risk, reward, and ruin.
Which brings us to the ultimate conclusion of this whole illicit corporate ladder once you hit 50. This timeline brilliantly and pretty darkly illustrates the stark, totally unavoidable reality of this ascent. You start out at 19, recruited on the street. You peak in your 30s and 40s managing vast territories and massive global operations. But by 50, the isolation is absolute. The journey almost always ends abruptly. It's either violently in some quiet hotel lobby or via a car bomb, or it's through a clean, quiet extradition straight to a U.S. federal supermax prison like ADX Florence.
So, as you leave behind this massive, totally unspendable fortune and a name that the underworld will forget by next week, we really have to look at the ultimate strategic reality of the syndicate. Was that extreme financial reward actually worth the all-consuming risk? Or are you really just a fleeting cog in a relentless cycle? A cycle that, right at this very second, is already out looking for the next broke, disciplined sucker standing on some humid Tel Aviv corner. It's definitely something to think about as we wrap up today's explainer. Thanks for joining me.